Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtotarashata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Continued readings from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 30, Text 7. Pinayatasya bhujamandala madhya lakshmya spardhaktriya parivrito vanamalayadhya Barhishmata purusha ahasutan prapanan Parjanyanada rutaya sangrinavaloka Pinayatasya bhujamandala madhya lakshmya Spardhaktriya parivrito vanamalayadhya Barhishmata purusha ahasutan prapanan Parjanyanada rutaya sangrinavaloka Hinajatasya bhujamandalamadhyalakshmya Svadakshya parivito vanamalayadhya Messages. Someone else? No? Okay. Word for word translation. Pina, stout. Ayata, long. Ashta, 8. Bhuja, arms. Mandala, encirclement. Madhya, in the midst of. Lakshmya, with the goddess of fortune. Spardhat, contending. Shriya, whose beauty. Parivrita, encircled. Vanamalaya, by a flower garland. Adhya, the original personality of Godhead. Barhishmata, of King Prachinabarhi. Purusha, the supreme personality of Godhead. Aha, addressed. Sutan, the sons. Prapanan, surrendered. Parjanya, like a cloud. Nada, whose sound. Rutaya, by a voice. Sagrina, with mercy. Avalokaha, his glancing. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Around the neck of the personality of Godhead hung a flower garland that reached to his knees. His 8 stout and elongated arms were decorated with that garland, which challenged the beauty of the goddess of fortune. With a merciful glance and a voice like thunder, the Lord addressed the sons of King Prachinabarhishat, who were very much surrendered unto him. Purport. The word adhya in this verse is very significant. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the origin even of Paramatma and Brahman. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 14:27, Brahmano hi pratishtaham. The absolute truth begins not with the impersonal Brahman, but with the original personality of Godhead, Krishna. When Arjuna realized Krishna's greatness, he addressed him in this way: Param Brahma Param Dhamma Pavitram Paramam Pavam Purusham Shashvatam Devyam Adi Devam Ajam Vibhum. You are the Supreme Brahman, the ultimate, the supreme abode and purifier, the absolute truth and the eternal divine person. You are the primal God, transcendental and original, and you are the unborn and all-pervading beauty. The Brahma Samhita also says, Anadir Adir Govinda Sarvakaranakaranam. Karanam. The Supreme Lord is not caused by anything, Anadi, but He is the cause of all causes. The Vedanta Sutra says, Janmadhyasya yataha. The Absolute Truth is that from which everything emanates. The Absolute Truth is described as Adipurusha. The Absolute Truth is therefore a person and is not impersonal. So this text is introducing, the Lord is about to speak. So because the purport was it was a little short, but I was kind of inspired. The next verses, very nice. Actually, we get to hear the Lord's speaking. So we'll read that as well. I'll just chant. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Varam Vrindvam Bhadram Vo Yuyame Nripanandana Sauhardina Pratagdharmas Tushtoham Sohridenava. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, My dear sons of the King, I am very much pleased by the friendly relationships among you. All of you are engaged in one occupation, devotional service. I am so pleased with your mutual friendship that I wish you all good fortune. Now you may ask a benediction of me. Purport. Since the sons of King Prajinabarhishat were all very united in Krishna consciousness, the Lord was very pleased with them. Each and every one of the sons of King Prajinabarhishat was an individual soul, but they were united in offering transcendental service to the Lord. The unity of the individual souls attempting to satisfy the Supreme Lord or rendering service to the Lord is real unity. In the material world, such unity is not possible. Even though people may officially unite, they all have different interests. In the United Nations, for instance, all the nations have their particular national ambitions, and consequently they cannot be united. Disunity between individual souls is so strong within this material world that even in a society of Krishna consciousness, members sometimes appear disunited due to their having different opinions and leaning toward material things. Actually, in Krishna consciousness, there cannot be two opinions. There is only one goal, to serve Krishna to one's best ability. If there is some disagreement over service, such disagreement is to be taken as spiritual. Those who are actually engaged in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot be disunited in any circumstance. This makes the Supreme Personality of Godhead very happy and willing to award all kinds of benedictions to His devotees, as indicated in this verse. We can see that the Lord is immediately prepared to award all benedictions to the sons of King Prajinabarhishat. Umagyanatimirandasya gyananjana salakaya chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadandikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindubhya Evacha Patitanan Pavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I'll just repeat the translation that we'll discuss. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, My dear sons of the King, I am very much pleased by the friendly relationships among you. All of you are engaged in one occupation, devotional service. I am so pleased with your mutual friendship that I wish you all good fortune. Now you may ask a benediction of me. So I'd like to ask for all the blessings of the devotees here, that we can, very nice text. One of the first things that kind of drew my attention was actually kind of reanalyzing or reappreciating the story of the Prachetas and how they actually achieved the Lord's favor. In devotional service, our whole goal is to actually grant this is to get this end, the actual satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. So here the Prachetas were so fortunate to have this pastime from the Srimad Bhagavatam, because it's explaining actually how they achieved success in life. How the Prachetas, the sons of King Prachinabarisha, were actually able to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is what we're doing. So when we're reading this pastime, we can understand its special significance for us. It's provided so that we can get inspiration from that. It's not just some kind of far-out thing that's not related to us or what we're trying to do. Actually, the Bhagavatam is so appreciated by devotees because it's giving us the inspiration and the appreciation by which we can try to follow in the footsteps of the Lord's devotees. So the Prachetas, they actually went underwater and executed severe austerities for 10,000 years. At which point it said the Lord became pleased with them. They were chanting the song given to them by Lord Shiva. So again, they actually completed the mission of life. So when we hear that also, this should give us great inspiration as far as what do we need to do to have that same result. Not necessarily the same austerities, but what do we need to do in our spiritual life to actually satisfy Krishna, so that Krishna reveals himself to us. This is the goal of life. An interesting point is that their process and our process is not so different also. The Prachetas received a mantra from Lord Shiva, and by their sincerity in chanting that mantra, the Lord became very pleased, as was indicated in some previous purports, that to offer the prayers of the devotees or the acharyas is much more efficient than trying to offer our own prayers, and the Lord becomes very easily pleased by one who offers those type of prayers. So we have also received what's called the Maha Mantra, the supreme mantra, and by the sincere chanting of this mantra also, Krishna becomes satisfied. And we see in the lives of great devotees that he reveals himself. And so the idea is that a half attempt will not get us there. The Prachetas, they took the mission of life very seriously to execute austerities. So as we reflect on our own practice, we can see what are we doing or what are we not doing. Are we really determined? In the case of the Prachetas, it was kind of resonating with me because last night we also discussed 241 in Bhagavad Gita, that the resolute purpose of one in Krishna consciousness. One who is irresolute's intelligence is many-branched. So here the Prachetas, they had this resolute purpose. Their aim was one. They went there to perform austerities under the direction of their father, and they carried it out, and they achieved the Lord's mercy. So similarly for us, we can analyze carefully what do we actually have to do, how much do we have to push ourselves to get that resolute determination. And it's explained actually that in the Bhagavad Gita, the resolute purpose of someone in Krishna consciousness is based on knowledge. And what is that knowledge? Because that's some very valuable knowledge. If that's what can actually get us to perfectly align our intelligence with the goal of life, that's a very valuable knowledge. And Prabhupada states, Vasudeva Sarvam Iti Sa Mahatma Sudurlabha. Understanding Krishna to be the root of everything and the cause of all causes, actually one can then surrender. One can understand that is the ultimate goal of life. Now it's interesting in the text that we chanted, the Lord's garland is being described, and he's saying, with a merciful glance and a voice like thunder, the Lord addressed the sons of King Prachinabarishad, who were very much surrendered unto him. So this is also mentioned in that text, is that by achieving that knowledge, that actually Krishna is the source of everything. Naturally, the sense of surrender awakens. And that's a nice point that Nityananda Prana has been mentioning also, how in this mood of dependence and appreciating the Lord's shelter, in a surrendered position, actually we can successfully execute Krishna consciousness, which is demonstrated here by the Prachetas. So now, I think we were all appreciating this translation. It's explaining what was it that was so pleasing to the Lord. And Krishna himself is saying, I am very much pleased by the friendly relationships among you. So this is great insight into the heart of Krishna. What was actually pleased him, it was that the Prachetas were working together. It says, the Lord was very pleased. They were all individuals, but they were united in Krishna consciousness. Krishna says, all of you are engaged in one occupation, devotional service. I am so pleased with your mutual friendship that I wish you all good fortune. So here, as the Prachetas came together, it was actually their friendly relationships and their mutual endeavor that pleased Krishna. It wasn't that they were all independently trying to receive that benediction, but actually they easily achieved Lord Krishna's pleasure by working together with the same purpose. This is a very large topic, but there was a few kind of sources that came to mind, a few things I thought I could share. A few different books I've been reading. This is a few letters from Srila Prabhupada on the subject. And this is a very well-known letter, but these are very important. Prabhupada says, "Now this displeasing of God brothers has already begun and gives me too much agitation in my mind. Our Gaudiya Math fought with one another after the demise of my Guru Maharaj, but my disciples have already begun fighting even in my presence. So I am greatly concerned about it. Following in the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, one should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respects to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. We must always remember this verse and be as tolerant as a tree as we execute the Krishna consciousness movement. Without this mentality, we cannot be successful. Material nature means dissension and disagreement, especially in this Kali Yuga. But for this Krishna consciousness movement, its success will depend on agreement, even though there are varieties of engagements. In the material world, there are varieties, but there is no agreement. In the spiritual world, there are varieties, but there is agreement. That is the difference. So this was indicated also previously discussed in yesterday's verse, the principle of variety is there because it's active in the spiritual world. So the only chance for spiritual variety is if there's a common interest, a common purpose to please Krishna. And that is the unifying principle. So this is a point that Srila Romapad Swami mentions oftenly, is that unity and diversity. The materialist, without being able to adjust the varieties and the disagreements, makes everything zero. They cannot come into agreement with varieties. But if we keep Krishna in the center, then there will be agreement in varieties. This is called unity in diversity. But if we fight on account of diversity, then it is simply the material platform. Please try to maintain the philosophy of unity and diversity. So this is the point that's being emphasized here, is that although the individual soul, it's mentioned in the purport, they have unique individualities, but they were all united in offering transcendental service. And Prabhupada's explaining before, this is real unity. In other words, there's so many types of or endeavors for unification in the world. We see practically all human societies is in some way or other trying to achieve this state of unity. World peace. These are appeals that attract everyone, actually, deep down. But how can that actually be possible? And that's only on the platform, as explained here, of a common purpose or a common identity. So what is that commonality that can actually unite everyone? It's not, fighting for the cure for cancer. Prabhupada's using the United Nations here as an example. People are coming together, but they have different interests. In the United Nations, they all have personal ambitions. They cannot be united. So there's so many examples of people coming together in the world, but because it's not going to the roots of their existence, it's more or less a designation, a material designation. So that's actually barring them. No matter what they may come up with or what they may try in the material world, they'll never actually become united. Only if they approach the spiritual dimension of the point, then Prabhupada's explaining real unity is possible. There's one other point in one of these letters by Srila Prabhupada. Actually, this is in the purport, that Prabhupada explains disunity. This is the problem. Disunity between individual souls is so strong within this material world that even in a society of Krishna consciousness, members sometimes appear disunited due to their having different opinions and leading toward material things. So that's a very interesting wording, is that what is the cause of the disunity? In other words, that's the cause for all frustration, and that's the cause for the frustrating of spiritual movements. And what is the root of that? Prabhupada says, different opinions and leaning toward material things. So what are those material things? Well, if we consider, we can understand Prabhupada may be referring to two things, gross and subtle material things. On a subtle platform, the material tendencies, the anarthas within us, actually check our loving relationships. It checks our friendship with others because of impurity. And gross material things also, we considered how Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur became very displeased in his Gaudiya Math that material things were getting in the way of their organization working together, fighting over different rooms. These type of petty issues actually became hindrances to the progressive movement. So this difference of opinion, however, does not overshadow the devotees. If they're actually in Krishna consciousness, then no matter, despite differences of opinion or thoughts, actually there will still be unity, because, it's explained here, their purpose is one. They're, in the wording here, you're engaged in one occupation, devotional service. So when this point is reached, there's no more disunity, there's no more conflict, actually. There can be difference of opinion, but it's not a source of disunity. It's very interesting the way Prabhupada mentions those who are actually engaged in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot be disunited in any circumstance. So that's a pretty amazing statement, because we may see in spiritual movements, it seems there's disunited. So if we continue on, Prabhupada will explain a little more. This makes the Supreme Personality of Godhead very happy and willing to award all kinds of benediction to his devotees, as indicated in this verse. So there is only one goal, to serve Krishna to the best of one's ability. If there is disagreement, such disagreement is taken as spiritual. So in Krishna consciousness there cannot be two opinions. How is that possible? It's stated here, those actually engaged cannot be disunited in any circumstance. So even though there may be different opinions, because the aim is one, that actually doesn't cause conflict. So this is a state that actually we all have to rise to. This is explained as becoming a more mature position in devotional service, and especially looking at our institution at large and our Sangha of devotees, coming to the point where difference of opinion do not hinder unity. Another point is mentioned, this may sound similar also to the Ishopanishad, where a few mantras are actually on this specific point. Mantras 6 and 7, we may recall from our study, are giving further insight into how this actually works. One who systematically sees everything in relation to the Supreme Lord, who sees all living entities as his parts and parcels, and who sees the Supreme Lord within everything, never hates anything or any living being. So in other words, on the spiritual platform, there's no more hate, there's no more dissension, there's peace. And it's explained towards the end of the purport. Someone on the liberated platform can see every living being as his own brother. This vision cannot be had by politicians who are always after some material gain. And then it's explained that such an imitator has no information of the spiritual world, and someone who does have the vision actually sees the spirit soul within the material body and serves him as spirit. So this is a vision that's actually required to please Krishna. As we heard from the verse, this is what satisfied the Lord, working collectively together. And Mantra 7 is also explaining, one who sees all living entities as spiritual sparks, in quality one with the Lord becomes a true knower of things. What then can be illusion or anxiety for him? And there's very nice points in the purport explaining how this actually happens. In a broader sense, there is one interest. Just as in a family, the interest of all members is one, or in a nation, the national interest is one, although there are many individual citizens. Since the living entities are all members of the same supreme family, their interest and that of the Supreme Being are not different. Every living being is the son of the Supreme Being. Therefore, all of them belong to the family of the Supreme Being. There is no clash of interest. So as we uncover our true identity, the process of self-realization, understanding who we really are as eternal servants, then naturally the disunity, the clash between us and the will of Krishna and the will of other living entities also gets resolved. And that's explained as the purification process. Another point that Prabhupada mentions this is a statement he made, we exist on cooperation. And this will just give a little more insight on how the benefit of gaining this understanding. The whole process is that all living entities, being constitutionally parts and parcels of the Supreme Living Being, the absolute personality of Godhead, have proportionately minute independence of action also. So, the preliminary qualification for entering into the devotional service of the Lord is that one becomes a willing cooperator, and as such one should voluntarily cooperate with persons who are already engaged in the transcendental devotional service of the Lord. By cooperating with such persons, the prospective candidate will gradually learn the techniques of devotional service, and with the progress of such learning, one becomes proportionately free from the contamination of material association. So, cooperating with those who are already in devotional service. In other words, the great souls are already fully aware of Krishna's will and Krishna's desire. So rather than coming up with our own idea of how to please Krishna, if we align ourselves with their will and their desires, then naturally we can see there's no clash of interest. And that's how we become perfectly aligned, actually, in Krishna consciousness. And then we can also endeavor for this realization that the Prachetas received on account of their cooperation. So this is kind of been described as our theme of the year by Srila Romapad Swami, who's our GBC and initiating spiritual master of many of us. So understanding this verse in context of a few of the points we were hearing, it seems that we can really go very deep into this subject. And by working together in devotional service as a community, as a sangha, in an ashram, then the benefit will be very widely felt. And that not only within ourselves, but actually this is what makes Krishna consciousness very attractive to others. When they see devotees are very peacefully interacting, sharing loving exchanges. When I was on traveling Sankirtan, I stopped in Philadelphia. And when you go on traveling Sankirtan, very mystically, whoever you're traveling with, you become very intimate, you become very good friends. It's kind of this magical purification process. So I was traveling with some very good friends, and there was one person we met who came to the Sunday feast, and he was kind of interested in Krishna consciousness, but he wasn't so sure. A lot of problems sometimes people face is connecting with devotees or making friendships. So we were talking with this one, and he'd been chanting, but he was also doing a lot of prohibited activities. And he was kind of serious, but also a little standoffish. And so we talked to him for some time, and then we were just heading back to the temple room. And we were kind of joking around, just getting ready to go back. And I think we had our arms on each other like that in a nice mood. And so we went in, and then later, actually, he had left, but he came back, and he came back to us, and he said, I can see that this is the only thing that's actually working in material life, actually, because the whole discussion was about how material life can't be happy. People think they're happy, but they're not happy. People that they think it's friendship, but if it's not going to come. So he said, you guys, I can see that actually this is actually working. You guys are actually happy, and you're having loving relationships. And so it was this kind of realization he had that actually with Krishna at the center, then actually the loving relationships are what inspires us and inspires others actually to the movement. So actually this is similar to what Rupa Goswami states in the Nectar of Instruction. Very important instructions. We may remember this verse: Dadati pratigrihnahi guyamakyanti prichati bhunkte bojayate chaiva sadvinam pritilakshanam. So these are the symptoms of love between devotees. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is explaining that the life of the Krishna Consciousness Society is nourished by these 6 types of loving exchange among the members. So the life of the Krishna Conscious Society. So we can understand these on a personal level, in a congregational level, and as a society at large. That this is nourishing the society is these 6 types of loving exchanges. And therefore, people must be given the chance to associate with the devotees of ISKCON, because simply by reciprocating in the 6 ways mentioned, an ordinary man can fully revive his dormant Krishna consciousness. Again, so that's the potency of these process, of these loving exchanges, that an ordinary man can very quickly, easily, completely revive his Krishna consciousness. But it's dependent on this, you could say, the science of association. So another point that I was just reflecting is the value of the relationships in Krishna consciousness is that we need to kind of sometimes step back from our day-to-day activities and look at the broader picture, that we're here in the material world, but we're on our way back to Godhead by the mercy of devotees. And so those with whom we have close association, that's a very valuable thing, actually. That should really kind of sink in a little bit, that the people, we're also traveling this path with our peers. And according to the spiritual realization, it's like a spiritual brotherhood. So this is a further cause for a unification, if you will. And that if we don't feel anything like in our heart as we're associating with devotees and progressing, then that can kind of be an indication that we're not seeing things clearly. In other words, as spiritual souls, the Lord is so pleased to see the jivas working together for His satisfaction. It's natural, just like a father wants to see his children. The father won't be pleased. Maybe the children are very great individually, but unless they're cooperating together, it won't be so satisfying. So similarly, in Krishna consciousness, the Lord becomes very pleased seeing devotees working together, actually. And it's a very transformative process. So I wanted to also share one thing about this, appreciating the devotees and the devotee association that we have, because that's what actually gives great mercy into our practice, actually. We see that the more we value the devotees and associate more lovingly with them, actually the doors of the spiritual kingdom, if you will, they become more available. It becomes more open in a humble mood. So a few points on that. This is a Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj book on Radha Shunya, missing mercy. In other words, missing the mercy of Radharani is aparad. So he has some very nice insights that have helped me, and I just wanted to share. I'm not sure if anyone has read this. But this is giving great insight into how Maya can influence us in a negative way in our progress. This says, sometimes people know they're going to lose an argument, but they want to slow things down. They want to hurt us. And since they don't care if they lose, they want to inflict as much damage as they can. Some people will unleash an onslaught of revenge, hatred, and enmity just to create suffering. This happens in the legal system also. There are times when people harass others through excessive litigation, even though they know they will eventually lose, because they want the opposing parties to suffer and struggle. This is a dangerous aspect of Maya's tactics, to try to get Vaishnavas distracted from their actual mission. The result is that when the devotees try to go about the real business of distributing the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, they have less enthusiasm, less energy, less resources, and less eagerness. So a common experience we may have is that sometimes there are disagreements or difference of opinion. And so those disagreements or differences can detract us from our service. It's explained here, this is one of Maya's tactics. So we shouldn't be surprised if throughout our devotional practice conflicts come up, because it's saying here, this is actually one of Maya's tactics, to try to distract us from the mission. Rather than going out together, there may be some kind of fringement or some sharpness between the devotees, which can distract us from the goal. And Prabhupada's explaining, it is not expected that every one of our members should be immediately to the standard qualification. The best thing for you to do is set the example by your personal behavior and try to reform others not by criticizing, but by friendly behavior. So in other words, this is a solution for us individuals, to try to set that example. Rather than having disputes come up and pointing fingers, which is our material tendency, taking this humble position that was mentioned by Srila Prabhupada, Trinadapi Sunichena. We can avoid these conflicts and then better render service to our spiritual masters, to the society, to Krishna. So we can also take note of the different forms of Vaishnava aparad that can hinder these loving exchanges. This we may have heard before, but this is actually very important to understand and meditate on, that there's actually 6 types of aparads listed in the Skanda Purana. One who kills a Vaishnava, one who blasphemes a Vaishnava, one who upon seeing a Vaishnava does not offer obeisance is considered an offense, one who gets angry at a Vaishnava, one who upon seeing a Vaishnava does not feel delighted upon seeing a Vaishnava, one who thinks ill of a Vaishnava in the mind. So these are 6 offenses explained in the Vedas, and that is very intrinsic for the development to our progressive Krishna consciousness to avoid those offenses very carefully. And one more point is, what can easily happen is that Maya will play an interesting trick. She inspires those who are trying to leave her sphere of influence to start fighting, so that gradually they fall back into her grips. It means that both parties will begin to lose some of their spiritual strength, their spiritual credits. It is so typical of fighting. Someone may win the fight, but both individuals have dirty clothes, black eyes, torn dresses, torn shirts, or torn pants. Someone may say, well, I really beat him up. Yes, but look at you. You've got a black eye, your clothes are torn, and you wasted so much energy and time. You should have been doing something else. This is what makes Maya very happy. She thinks these entities would normally be combating my influence and bringing others out of my grip, but now they are distracted by fighting and varieties of anxiety. So we may have experience of this, or this may come in the future, but kind of meditating on this point that this is actually a tactic of Maya to distract us from our mission. This will further create this mood of loving devotion, being wary of these type of pitfalls, and we can continue to develop these loving communities which are very attractive, very pleasing to Krishna, and inspirational for the public at large and for ourselves also. One other interesting point I wanted to get into a little more was how this type of loving moods can be checked. And there's a amazing article by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur that I'll just share a few points. He says, "It is painful to see people wasting their valuable time in no better work than mischievous, ill-conceived criticisms of others' conduct. They excel only in giving advice to others. Their damned mind is, no doubt, responsible for this. So every morning on rising from bed, they should make their wicked mind hear the following immortal song of Thakur Bhaktivinoda." I'll just read the translation. "In this song, the mind is asked, first of all, to hold bhajan of Radha Krishna in the sacred woodland of Braj." And he goes on to explain not absorbing one's thoughts in fruitive workers or philosophers, but fixing the mind on pure bhajan. And if we are unmindful, it says, to counteract the aforesaid tendencies in us, we should sing every morning, advising our wicked mind to hold bhajan, which is impossible if we are unmindful of the dictum. And this is actually what we do chant every morning. Trinadapi suniche nam, the Siksastakam verse, which means that Hari Kirtan should be continued ceaselessly and with the humility of low grass. So this is giving insight into the nature of our material mind, due to its existence so long in the material atmosphere, and the solution of actually holding this bhajan within our mind, meditating, and the desire to become humble as a blade of grass counteracts these material tendencies. Another point that will help nourish this type of mood and working together cooperatively is the very important principle of serving those devotees. Because we may try to work together, but unless this service spirit is there, it's likely to fade after some time. So in another article, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is answering the question, why are we not feeling any closeness to Krishna? And he explains, the living entity is constitutionally a servitor of the Supreme Lord. But if we do not always associate with the Lord and His devotees and do not always serve them, then how can we feel close to the Lord? A very simple point, but if we are busy with worldly matters, then how can we hear the Lord? At present we are enchanted by false hopes which have resulted in wrong judgment. Thus we are heavily preoccupied with this world. We have become subject to wrong judgment because we have gone far away from the original fountainhead of our life. Serving the devotees is more beneficial for us than serving the Lord. The living entity is benefited more by associating with devotees than by associating with the Lord. The abode of a devotee, meaning the abode of Gurudev, is more favorable for pure devotional service than the abode of the Lord. Where Vaishnavas are living, that place is Vrindavan. We have to try to understand the full meaning of these words. But if we become indifferent to the service of Gurudev, then we cannot become servitors. We will remain proud and ignorant. we will remain entangled in external thoughts. So this principle of serving the devotees, in particular here it's mentioned not being inimical or not being indifferent to the will of the spiritual master. That principle will actually continue to guide us in our loving exchanges with devotees because of a loving mood towards pleasing Krishna through the spiritual master. And one other final point, just because we need to understand the negative aspects before we can fully embrace and accept the positive points of loving relationships. And this is explaining pride is demoniac. Gaur Govinda Maharaj is explaining, you should have no pride, no arrogance, and no conceit. And then the verse from the Bhagavad Gita, pride, arrogance, conceit, anger, harshness, and ignorance, these qualities belong to those of demoniac nature. Pride is a demoniac characteristic. It is not Vaishnava. A Vaishnava is much humbler than a blade of grass lying on the street. He thinks himself lowest of the low. Only the highest person has such a mentality. Everyone else will quarrel and demand, I am great. No, you're not. I am great. A real Vaishnav sadhu is the topmost person, but he says, I am the lowest of the low. His attitude is natural, not artificial. So this is insight on how developing the proper humility will protect us from the obstacles to enhanced understanding of our spiritual position and the understanding of how to properly cooperate and work and serve with others. And in regards to this text, we can see that this is really the means of satisfying Krishna, working together in unity. And even though there may be differences of opinion, if we're united with a spiritual understanding of who we are, then we can progress on the path of this universal brotherhood that's encouraged throughout the Vedic literature. And I was personally appreciating this because of my own practice. These points I found very insightful, so I'm kind of more, or in one sense, also just preaching to myself. And I think the message, because it is a point that Maharaj was emphasizing, that I think we can all take a deeper look and endeavor by this great shastric pastime to appreciate that message. And we can go over that again and meditate and try to imbibe that spirit. So thank you all very much. I apologize that if the class, any shortcomings of the class or for the shortcomings of the class. And thank you all very much. We don't have much time left, which is good because I'm not so able to answer your questions. But if anyone has a question, Nityananda Prabhu can answer it. So, thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Did anyone have a question? Do you have a question?
And many qualities that are required to foster loving relationships is a very, very important principle. One doubt I was having was, we were just in New York recently and we saw a lot of, the mood in New York is very much this idea of loving relationships. Let's all be nice to each other. Let's all be loving towards each other. And we could meditate on that internally, but until we all come together to do what Krishna and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommend is the way for fostering loving relationships, which is the performance of Harinam Sankirtan together, then how can just meditating on the qualities actually create loving relationships? You know what I'm saying? So maybe
meditating on which qualities?
Just this importance of having loving relationships and having unity, but not really so much coming together to perform Harinam Sankirtan. So because that is, and there's so many verses. I mean, I'm not Shastra Chakshu or anything, but I can think of the English translations of several verses. I mean, the one prominent one Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, my devotees come together to glorify me, and by this, they feel happy and enlightened and like that. So could you speak a little bit about this is from Bhagavad Gita. There's a similar verse in the Bhagavatam also, the Parasparam Nukathanam verse, Treasurer was always quoting. So could you just speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up. That was a point I was actually wanting to mention, but I was trying to cover some of these references. But the principle I was stressing was actually the mode of service. Because unless we actually have the mood of service to the devotees, then our kirtan will not be so transformative. Because Bhaktisiddhanta is explaining that service to the devotees is greater than service to the Lord. So in working together by trying to serve the devotees and understanding the value of that principle, then whatever devotional activities we're doing, especially Harinam Sankirtan, that is our that is our Yuga Dharma, those will all be nourished. But there's also a variety of services. So the Harinam Sankirtan should be at the center of our sadhana or devotional practice in any stage. And these principles are helped to nourish that also. And so that was a point I was meaning to mention, actually, that we can appreciate these topics also in light of the activities we're doing as a congregation here together. And the congregational chanting is one of the, we have experienced one of the easiest ways by which we can taste these loving relationships and experience. But these are also dependent on getting a proper conception of devotees, avoiding offenses, and understanding the proper siddhanta, because that actually gives nourishment to our kirtan. I think we were discussing, I was sharing recently how the philosophy, to the degree we accept the philosophy, that will be an impact on our kirtan and our japa. So we shouldn't consider these points as different from Harinam Sankirtan. We should consider the philosophy in Harinam Sankirtan as it's one process, and the philosophy gives nourishment to the chanting, congregational chanting. Okay, thank you. Nityananda Prabhu, would you like to share anything?
No.
Well, I'm getting signs that it's time. I don't want to go over. I'm sure everyone's had their fill, perhaps. But very nice verse, and thank you all very much. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam. All glories to the assembled devotees. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.